we built these Onera properties that were, I call them landscape hotels. Some might call them like a treehouse resort. We have a bunch of different unique unit types that are definitely elevated, definitely unique, and showcase the natural landscape. So we have everything from custom tree houses, container homes, safari tents. We have one unit out in Wimberley that's called the greenhouse that has a full green roof. So there's natural grasses and wildflowers and things like that actually growing on the roof. So we've really tried to push the envelope of unique experiential units upscale in a natural setting.
Austin Community Capital. This show is a celebration of the spirit of Austin, Texas, honoring our past, engaging our present, and building our future together.
Ben, it's great to have you on the podcast. We know each other because we had a very small overlap at Quid, software company we both worked at before both moving into the real estate world. And there was this lore of Ben when I came to the company. We were on opposite coasts. I was Bay Area, you were in New York. But what I would hear about is just the wild creativity you brought to deals. We were both sales team. And that is a good segue into something I really admire about you is the way you've taken creative risks in the hospitality world to go out and do a really bold project and make a vision happen. And really excited to unpack that a little more today. I want to start by letting you share a little bit about what formed this hosting, this hospitality nature in you. And maybe we start with, high school and formative years. Where did this hosting spirit come from?
Yeah, I think I have an internal drive to want to curate experiences and help people have a good time. I often find myself, I hosted and helped put together plenty of house parties when I was in high school and later in college. I actually had an events and promotions company in college where we would bus kids, to and from the school and to like whatever bar or nightclub we had a deal set up with. But we would curate that experience and I was always much more concerned with like other people having a good time even than myself having a good time. And I think that is really the hosting and hospitality at heart that I feel like I kind of grew up with. My parents have always hosted and I saw that. I think I probably learned from that, but there's just this joy in watching an event or a stay or an experience and seeing excitement, energy, enthusiasm from your guests.
Absolutely. And I think what you were doing, and particularly starting a company in college, that's a lot of initiative that I think, most people don't have. And when you're at a 4-year university, it's quite demanding. Like, where did that initiative come from or what, enables that in you?
I mean, I think I've had this pretty insatiable drive since I was a little kid. My mom talks about when I was very young, almost treating play like work, where I would be playing, working for like 3 hours at a clip, kind of solo. I actually did a lot of playing with Playmobil. I don't know if you're familiar, but it was very much like city, and world building, which is kind of interesting, ironic. Like I ultimately got into real estate. There was something innate within me. I actually did this project when I was in 4th grade that was like my mother's dream house. And so it was my first foray into like design, architecture, and really like creating spaces and maybe placemaking to some extent. So I think it's kind of been in my blood. When it comes to, college and being entrepreneurial, I knew I wanted to start my own business, I feel like since late high school into early college. And in my mind, it was like, just start somewhere, start trying things. I mean, that's what I had heard from a lot of other successful entrepreneurs. It's like typically not the first, second, third, fourth thing that you do or try that is the big hit. So it's the more I can try things, learn how to run a business, learn how to cash flow something. I will continue to learn things, and sooner or later I'll be better, more experienced, and get a little bit of luck, which I think is all of those things are required to have a really big, successful company.
And I think if only everyone had that type of exposure that you had of understanding cash flow, understanding how kind of the gears of a business turn in college or even in high school. I was a little bit later to that game, so I think it's incredible that you came from that foundation. I want to build toward where you are now with the hospitality business. So take me through some meaningful moments and milestones along that professional journey and how that was shaping you to, how you show up in the market now.
Yeah, look, my journey has been very far from a straight line. It's kind of gone up and all over the place. I mean, even like my experience at Quid was amazing, but feels pretty off topic when you look, when you look at the trajectory. But I do also think all of my experiences have shaped the very unique business and entrepreneurial ventures that I have today. So when I was going through it, it was kind of like, oh, maybe this feels a little bit random, but I always ended up doing things that I was drawn to. So initially in college, that was the events and promotions company. I feel like that was my initial intro to hospitality, really. And then from there, I got into, I actually ended up transferring schools. I went to NYU and, was living in the city. So I was really seeing hospitality at a whole different level in the city than I was in, let's say, my smaller hometown or when I was in St. Louis before that. And when I went to NYU, I had a focus in business. I was going to Stern, but I also had a minor in entrepreneurship. And there was a class at NYU called Entrepreneurship in the New Economy that was actually taught by a VC, a local VC. So it was really cool to take that class. We ended up getting this like mobile app up and running that didn't turn into anything, but that was like kind of my second entrepreneurial venture, right? And my second experience after the events and promotions company. And being in New York City at that time was really incredible because it was like peak Silicon Alley.
And give us a time frame for that.
Yeah, so this was like 2009-ish, 2010, 11. So Foursquare, Uber, Techstars was coming to New York. It was really booming. And tech startups were kind of the hot thing. So I was learning more about that. I was thinking like, do I want to do something in tech? And I actually did a independent study called Non-Tech Founders in Tech because I was not a coder, didn't really want to be a coder. And I came to find out that most of the successful non-tech founders in tech were either like luck-sacked into a roommate that they were very close with that was the technical co-founder, or they were an extreme domain expert in a technical business that required that domain expertise. So after seeing that, I was kind of like, maybe tech, is or isn't for me. And I feel like from there, I started trying different things. I didn't know what I wanted to start next. So I ended up working in consulting out of school. I got a job at McKinsey, which was, great for the resume, good like blue chip company. I learned about making decks and analysis. And there were some specific things that I picked up at McKinsey that actually carried through my whole career. One of them was actually outsourcing and finding offshore talent. So we did a project with a big bank where they wanted us to recommend where to do an offshore facility. So Malaysia or the Philippines, we were looking at some different areas. And that really turned me on to this idea of virtual assistants, offshoring. And at Quid, I don't know if you heard this or remember this, but I actually hired my first dedicated VA.
Yes.
And I got Quid to pay for this basically, right? Or I had this PhD in Armenia that, PhD in econ. I think we were paying him somewhere between 10 and 15 bucks an hour, which was a lot over there. And he was helping me with, all of these creative and very robust, detailed sales pitches. So we would do, call it 50% of an analysis that a client might do on their own to kind of show the power and capability of Quid.
When I'll react to that, I remember hearing about that and thinking to myself, you can just go do that? I was observing your initiative and just making things happen. You're like, all right, I have a need. This would be more efficient. I'm going to find a solution. Offshoring. I love that.
This show is supported by Loyal Home Concierge. You can take a company public, but you just found a scorpion in the guest room. Welcome to Austin. We'll handle it. LoyalHomeConcierge.com.
it's funny, I have a 4-year-old now, and I think there's a lot of him and me, or me and him. I was never afraid to ask. I was like, what's the worst that's going to happen from asking? Somebody's going to say no, right? And that boldness and willingness to kind of put myself out there, I think has definitely served me in trying to become and in becoming an entrepreneur. I think it's really served me. So had a lot of success at Quid with that first, offshore virtual assistant who did phenomenal work. He was like one of the best hires I've probably made to date. And while I was at Quid, I started getting into, I had a side hustle of running Airbnbs, short-term rentals, kind of on the side.
And where was that focused geographically?
It was mostly urban. It was before a lot of the cities started really cracking down on Airbnb. So we had New York, we had LA, and it really expanded from there. But initially it was just New York. That's where I was. And so when we were at, so it started in New York, and I had, just a few apartments that we were what's called lease arbitraging. So we were leasing, and then we'd design them, take good photos, and sublease them on Airbnb. I started doing that, did that for about a year to 2 years, got up to about 8 units.
Were you the designer?
If you go back and look at the photos of some of these early apartments, I was the designer. I'm not super proud of what I put together at that time. I think we've come a long way. And I've also learned that I want to have a professional designer, right, for any of my projects moving forward. But yeah, at the time, I was doing some of the early design. And then I had a friend of mine who wanted to get into design and kind of have an eye for things. She actually introduced me to my wife, a good, very close friend of mine. And she's done design work for me all throughout. She's actually done a lot of the interior design for even some of my more recent hotels. So we kind of graduated from my early sort of hodgepodge design to more curated, better design from her. And it was in April 2018. I'd been at Quid for a couple of years. And I started, thinking about my time, and thinking about sort of how much money I was making at Quid versus time, and then how much money I was making with the short-term rentals versus my time. And it just became very clear, like, I'm doing less work, making more money on this short-term rental real estate play than I am at my software sales job. So that led to me transitioning out of Quid and running the short-term rental business full-time. And when I did, and when I really went all in, is when our growth skyrocketed. I mean, we went from 8 units that was all lease arbitrage, we controlled, and then we started managing for others. So we had a managed portfolio, and then we kind of had our own units, and it ballooned to 200 units under management by the end of 2019. So in about 18 months, we went from 8 to 200.
Wow. And let me ask a question about that. And so this was early-ish days for Airbnb. It was still very much, the frontier that people were figuring out, okay, how do we optimize in this community? What were you picking up amidst this growth about that community, how to be successful in it, how to attract people to these properties, and then also hospitality? What were you picking up that was enabling, facilitating that growth?
Honestly, early on, it was very much an arbitrage, right? There was not enough supply in these cities.
Kind of.
Yeah, just in New York and some of these markets, especially properties with higher bedroom count. So like a townhouse with 4 or 5 bedrooms was very rare in New York. So the supply demand imbalance was huge. But I will say, like, within just a couple of years, hosts got more sophisticated, properties got better, the design got considerably better. So we had to continue to level up our game from a design, hospitality, operations standpoint as the market matured, if you will. But yeah, I mean, even back then, there was this community of short-term rental operators, or like I said, lease arbitrage, where you'd lease apartments, design them, sublease them. There was definitely a community sort of growing at that time. Actually, my business partner now, who had a very early short-term rental management company as well, he was very close with Scott Chatford. I don't know if you know AirDNA, but AirDNA is probably like the biggest data platform out there for short-term rentals. And my partner was friends with him, hung out in Santa Monica in his garage. At this time he was doing these like monthly reports. And my business partner was like, nobody cares about your monthly reports. You got to create a dashboard, right? And that's what led to what became the AirDNA dashboard. And, Scott's done well, like $100 million exit. And he probably one of the bigger success stories of somebody in that short-term rental ecosystem. So there was definitely a community, and everyone was doing so well that there wasn't like this cutthroat competitive environment yet, because there was such a supply and demand imbalance of, quality short-term rentals in some of these cities.
And then, so you were building up this Airbnb portfolio and you made a pivot at some point to your own properties. Walk me through that transition, how that came about, and then where you landed.
Yeah, so for a long time, we were just leasing apartments and townhomes. And then we started buying a couple single family homes, and we were getting into that. Wasn't developing anything ground up, which I came to later. And it was March 2020. So when COVID hit, effectively, I was at an offsite in Boracay in the Philippines I had a team of offshore VAs. So we were leveraging, offshore talent. We had a ton of virtual assistants over there helping with guest communications, with pricing, with, some like back office accounting type functions as well. So we had 20 people over there, but at kind of our height. And so we were doing this offsite with them, and COVID hit, right? March 2020. We're over there doing this offsite. I remember I flew into Manila, and a day or two after I got there, they shut down the Manila airport. So that was obviously, kind of scary. But we still had the offsite. We tried to have, the best experience that we could, but all of our bookings started getting canceled overnight. So the urban short-term rental market was kind of evaporating before our very eyes. And I had been thinking about doing something more unique, experiential, more of a curated experience that maybe was developed ground up. I had been thinking about doing this for a while, and COVID happening and our core business really shriveling up in a lot of ways pushed me, gave me the kick in the butt that I needed to say, okay, I'm going to pivot and start going after this idea of doing this nature-focused retreat that I had been thinking about for a while. Me and my wife had gotten off a 6-week road trip around the southwestern US. So coming from New York City to doing this like RV road trip, fell in love with the great outdoors, did not fall in love with all the headaches we had to deal with the RV. So when I was building the first, outdoor hospitality concept, I knew that I wanted it to be upscale, almost luxury, all the comforts of home and then some, to remove any friction that the guest would experience when they were staying in one of our cool tree houses or safari tents or, whatever. Really being able to connect with the great outdoors without having to deal with, broken diesel filters or a storage compartment in the RV breaking or something like that. So that was really the genesis of what became Onera.
And question about that. So I love the thoughtfulness going in and all the components of the vision of noticing, okay, I don't want these components of the customer, the guest experience. I maybe do want more of this. Talk me through what you wanted them to feel. And so this is, pre-development. What did you want your guests to feel and experience that helped you, into design and actually creating it?
Yeah, so we were really chasing this idea of perfect moments, okay? And so how do you get the guest into this experience of these moments of perfection, right? So it's waking up, drawing the curtains, having this beautiful view of the forest with a deer walking by, sipping on your espresso. How do we craft that moment of perfection and remove any friction they might experience, like I was describing with the RV issues or issues you might have with camping, et cetera. So that was always the vision. It's like, how do we create this perfect environment for you to reconnect with yourself, your loved ones, and the outdoors?
I love that. We spend a lot of time, we're a services business really focused on customer experience. We study the Ritz-Carlton management philosophy and guest philosophy.
You're visualizing the Serengeti sunset. You are not visualizing the 3-hour hold time to change your flight connection in Cape Town. Did you know Loyal does that too? From fixing the faucet to planning your family's African safari, we handle the logistics so you can handle the adventure.
Wow!
Loyal Home Concierge, your passport to peace of mind.
And I'm hearing a lot of that in what you're saying of thinking of all the things that are probably unseen, that may not be noticed directly by a guest, but things are moving in the background. There's a lot of intentionality that goes into, removing that friction you're talking about. I love that thoughtfulness.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think also different than the REITs, right? Like we don't have a ton of staff running around. Our properties have always been relatively staff light, but the idea is let's give you everything you need, make sure you're taken care of, but not be overbearing, right? We wanted to strip away some of the staff because the idea of these outdoor getaways is seclusion, maybe with a romantic partner. And it's the idea of being in your own little bubble, as opposed to, for me, if there's too many staff running around, sometimes it can almost feel like overbearing, right? When I'm like just trying to connect with a loved one in the outdoors, really connect with this amazing unit that I'm staying in. We removed no check-in desk. We would do daily cleanings upon request, but there's no like knocking on the door, housekeeping, right? Once a day. So really trying to strip all that away and have everything the guests need already taken care of, right? Your Nespresso pods filled and ready. Obviously your bed made nicely and the room all clean, clear instructions on how to use your private hot tub, like all these sorts of things so that you can just go right into the flow of having that, great experience with your partner.
Absolutely. I love that. And give us a picture of current and future projects so folks know, what these properties are that we're talking about.
Yeah. So the first brand I started, I just moved to Austin. And so the Texas Hill Country was a natural place to go for the great outdoors, for a drive-to destination. Ended up building one of our properties in Fredericksburg, Texas, which is kind of like Texas wine country, part of the Hill Country, and Wimberley, Texas, which has amazing views, just 45 minutes south of Austin. And some amazing like natural water features and just like natural landscape features in general out there. So those were the two markets we were targeting, and we built these Onera properties that were, I call them landscape hotels. Some might call them like a treehouse resort. We have a bunch of different unique unit types that are definitely elevated, definitely unique, and showcase the natural landscape. So we have everything from custom tree houses, container homes, safari tents. We have one unit out in Wimberley that's called the greenhouse that has a full green roof. So there's natural grasses and wildflowers and things like that actually growing on the roof. So we've really tried to push the envelope of unique experiential units upscale in a natural setting.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And also you recognize an opportunity to develop a side business that's very complementary to your own properties. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so being a real estate developer is a long game for sure. It's how do we, I think most real estate developers I know that don't come from like a trust fund or big family money, they have some sort of cash flow business as well. And we sort of fell into ours based on the needs that our properties had. So when I first built Onera, I didn't know that we were going to be very social media heavy, driving direct bookings primarily through Instagram. When we first started, we didn't have a direct booking website. We didn't even have an Instagram. We were using Airbnb, Booking.com, like these traditional OTAs, online travel agencies that I had used in my career in the short-term rental world. So that's what we started as. And a couple months in, we had a travel influencer that was big on Instagram reach out to us on Airbnb, asking us to promote our property and do a collab with us, basically. So first I was skeptical, and then ultimately, said, all right, come out, let's try it. So we spun up an Instagram page, we spun up a direct booking page, and across 2 posts that she did, we did about $30,000 in direct bookings. So the lights came on to the power of social media at that time. That was early 2022. And so leaned into influencer marketing, did a bunch more of that first year. We did about 30% of our bookings direct. And then in the next year, 23, we wanted to double down on social media. Can we push this even further? Can we start creating and posting more of our own content and not be so reliant on just influencers? So we tried to hire an agency, and that agency, it became very clear, like they had some great logos, Ritz, Four Seasons, The Line, like they were managing social media for some of these amazing hotels, but the content was kind of an afterthought for their agency. Like it either landed on us as the owner to figure out the content piece and give it to them, or they would send a junior employee once a quarter with an iPhone to get content. So I realized pretty quickly, like content is the whole thing. So like, what am I paying you for if not to create amazing content? So we ended up building up our own team in order to serve the need that we had. So top videographers, editors, copywriters, like we ended up building out this whole team of specialists that's now, my company Oasi that does hotel marketing, social media content, and also revenue management, and in some cases full service management. That company is now 25 people, and more than half of them are on the marketing side. So, videographers, editors, copywriters, data analysts, performance marketers, ads people, email marketers, it goes on and on. And so we were doing that originally for our properties, Onera, and then, others after that. And we got Onera to about 80% direct bookings, which is a pretty hefty number of high value, direct booking guests. And it was pretty much all driven through social media and through content. So then we started doing it for others. And now we really have this team where we can act as an outsourced CMO, and so chief marketing officer, and like outsourced CRO, chief revenue officer for hotels and resorts. So instead of paying a director of marketing $100,000 at the property level to basically be a coordinator, you can hire a group like ours, and we have specialists in every seat, and you can reallocate some of that, maybe $100,000 into ads and content and just making your marketing actually better overall.
I love that. And what I'm hearing from your strategy that I really like is you're taking the power of storytelling and the power of community to really draw people in, and the direct bookings number is phenomenal, and it's amazing that you've been able to succeed at that for your properties and also replicate it for clients. I want to segue a little bit, Ben, to just, life in Austin. What does that look like for you and your family? What does community look like here? Yeah, what's the environment look like for your world in Austin?
Yeah, it's a good question. We love Austin. We moved down here kind of on a whim after we got married in 2019. And one of the things I loved about Austin when I first got here, and I think my wife did as well, we're coming from New York City. First question out of everybody's mouth is, so what do you do? Right? When we came to Austin, and I still think it's still this way today, question is like, what do you like to do? What brought you to Austin? It's more of a holistic view of the person and not just like your occupation. And I feel like it's a community that really prioritizes recreation, health and wellness, fitness, just different aspects of yourself outside of just work. And like, I can be a workaholic. So being in an environment like that, I feel like pushes me to prioritize other aspects of myself and fill up my cup in other areas. So I've really found that. I feel blessed to, I had a kind of a community immediately coming to Austin. So I've been sober now, it'll be 10 years in November. And so the sober community is pretty tight knit. So I was kind of immediately able to plug into some of that when I came here. We've since had 2 kids. So, so there's been connections made through our kids, through school, and all of that. So, I love Austin. I love the people. I think that it's very entrepreneurial. It's very it's kind of a hotbed for content creators, which I've become, even though it's not what I started as. So, I'm a happy customer of Austin, Texas.
I love that. Likewise.
Yeah.
And you touched on this a little bit, but you're a guy who can run hot. You can, in your words, be prone to workaholism. You're naturally extroverted, and that's, the picture I've seen of you.
You wouldn't take a Ferrari to a quick lube. So why are you managing your estate with a magnet on the fridge? Your home is an asset. Treat it with dignity. Loyal Home Concierge provides white glove stewardship for Austin's most discerning homes. Proactive care, absolute discretion your investment deserves.
what keeps you grounded and what's really important in your day-to-day, week-to-week rhythm so that you can create these types of experiences that you'd like to?
Yeah. So I'm very regimented. Like if it's not on my calendar, it's probably not happening, but my calendar is like very fleshed out with a lot of the things that keep me balanced and keep me at hopefully peak performance. And some of that though is just, baking in time with family, with my kids. Like we started doing this thing now where we go for a morning walk pretty much every day, which is great for getting the circadian rhythm going and like that morning light exposure. But it's also just great to like connect first thing in the morning, because otherwise I'm running off to work, my wife's running off to taking the kids to school, and I don't see them until the very end of my day, call like 6:30. And I've been up since 4 a.m., 4 or 5 a.m. And so I don't have the energy that I do in the morning. So it's nice to like get that time and that foundation early on with our little, core group and support system. So that's one piece. Something else that's been a game changer for me is that I get up really early. So I get a lot done, from 4 to 5 a.m. until call it, 9 or 10 a.m. And then at that point, I've done a ton of deep work. I've gotten, a lot of these like pressing priorities off my plate. And I'll often go to work out, to hit some, golf balls at the range, something to allow myself to reset. And I've gotten really into contrast therapy. So I do a lot of sauna cold plunge. And I feel like if I work out or do contrast therapy, or hit some golf balls, it's almost like I have 2 days in one. So I'll have this like deep work period until 10 or 11 in the morning. I'll go do that. And then I have my afternoon, which is oftentimes stacked with calls. So, can kind of get into that. But, being disciplined about getting home early enough to have dinner with my wife and my kids and, help put them to bed and all that. So it's hard having 2 kids under the age of 4 and building multiple entrepreneurial ventures to do more than just like lean into that community and try to take care of myself physically. Get enough sleep, all of that. So sometimes social can kind of go by the wayside, honestly, when you're in that season of life.
Totally understandable.
Yeah.
And I love hearing again, just that strong intentionality in you. I mean, to have a day like that and a routine like that, particularly starting at that hour, takes a high degree of intentionality. I mean, I could learn from your example there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm always kind of like trying, like tweaking and optimizing. I mean, I've gotten a little into like the biohacking universe in the past like 6 months to a year. What really propelled me to focus more on my health and well-being and like my performance was having kids, having them start school, and me getting sick all the time. I never used to get sick, like ever. And once they started school, it felt like our family was sick like 40% of the time. So I was like, I got to start doing something different. I got to, I want to feel better. I want to be in better, physical shape so I can fend off more of these illnesses. And I've been really focusing on that this whole year. And the results have been remarkable. I mean, since May, when I had really layered in everything that I'm doing now, from supplements to, my workout routine, to the contrast therapy, to sleep hygiene, all this stuff. I've only been sick once, and it was coming back from Tulum. So it may have just been a gift from Mexico.
Montezuma's relative.
Yeah. So, I mean, all that to say, like, I feel like I have a lot of external factors that have like really motivated me to try to feel better and be better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, as we start to move the conversation to a close, I'd love to give you the opportunity to share with our audience, any final thoughts or any ways they can find you, maybe point them to the properties, how they can have an experience at one of these phenomenal hotels we've heard about.
Yeah. So I kind of touched on it before. I've become a content creator. I did not start out that way, but I had a friend of mine, Isaac French, who started a similar kind of landscape hotel type property around the same time I did. And he started sharing it with the world on Twitter and podcasts and all the rest. And I just saw the momentum that he was experiencing. And me and my business partner just started realizing how important personal brand is, right? When people see you online and they can binge a bunch of your content, they see your, post, they see how you think, they can actually feel like they like, know, and trust you before they meet you. Which is a crazy, kind of superpower, I feel like. So I started really leaning into content, personal brand. And so I'm posting pretty consistently on LinkedIn. So you can find me there, Ben Wolff, 2 Fs. I have a newsletter, which you can find a link to there, where I'm putting out, the modern hospitality trends and really just travel more broadly. So sign up for the newsletter. And I've been posting a lot more on Instagram lately as too. So I am Ben Wolff, 2 Fs, doing a lot of short form content on there. We do a ton of Instagram content for our hotels, but I only really started investing in my own in the past 5 or 6 months. So there's some good stuff on there as well. My properties, stayonera.com. So, Texas Hill Country, one in Fredericksburg, one in Wimberley. And if you're a potential hotel marketing or management client for Oasi, stayoasi.com. And finally, I have this new, very exciting hotel brand that I'm starting, which is sort of maybe even an evolution or the next step after Onera for me. And that is Baya. And Baya is, it's still nature, like outdoor experiential, but it's also wellness and agritourism. So I've kind of talked about my evolution with health and wellness. Baya, incorporates quite a bit of that, as well as this focus on agritourism and farm experiences. And that blends over with wellness, right? This intentionality around your food, growing a lot of that on site. And our first location for Baya is, it's in Miami-Dade County. It's just 45 minutes from Miami. And it creates this tropical paradise type vibe, almost like a jungle vibe, like you might find in Costa Rica or Bali. But we're creating this experience stateside, really, I think, for the first time. So think like Bali-inspired bungalows tucked in the jungle. And most of the property is actually still going to be a working exotic fruit farm. So we'll incorporate a lot of that exotic fruit into our farm-to-table cafe and juicery, into guided farm tour experiences, and we'll have a number of wellness amenities and modalities available as well, from hydrotherapy, contrast therapy, and we're really actually trying to see if we can get to the cutting edge of sleep wellness. So there's some of the greatest technology out there when it comes to mattresses, when it comes to like circadian lighting and air quality and things like that. So we're trying to make Baya this really restorative. So not only a unique experience, but also very restorative to the soul.
I love that. You're responding to what the market is wanting right now. So I think that's amazing. And I highly endorse Ben's properties. I toured the Wimberley property with you, and for locals here in Austin, get out there and check out Wimberley or Fredericksburg. Just immediately getting on site, you can feel the thoughtfulness that has gone into curating that amazing guest experience. I felt that, and I think what you built is incredible. Leave the audience with one question. Let's say someone is new to Austin. How would you recommend they plug into community?
Yeah, I think that it's so dependent on the individual. But the great thing about Austin is, like, whatever you're into, it feels like there is an option, right? So if you're into sports, there's so many. It's like I've seen more like club and intramural type sports and leagues in Austin than I feel like I've seen anywhere else. So plug into that. If you're into golf, like me, join a club, right? It's so sort of dependent. If you're into business, right, you can join one of these real estate meetups where I pitched Baya the other day that you invited me to. Figure out what you're into, lean into that, and don't try to be someone you're not just to build community, right? Figure out, what am I passionate about? What do I love? And try to tap into those communities in Austin, because regardless of what you're into, it seems like there's an option for you here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ben. Really enjoyed our time and really grateful to have you on the show.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Austin Community Capital. This show is a celebration of the spirit of Austin, Texas, honoring our past, engaging our present, and building our future together. If this conversation sparked something in you, a new idea, a feeling of connection, or just a good laugh, pass it on. Share this episode with a fellow Austinite or a loved one who needs to hear it. Let's keep weaving this fabric of community together. This show is proudly presented by Loyal Home Concierge. At Loyal, we believe that a healthy, thriving city starts within the four walls of your home. We are passionate about supporting overextended executives, the moms and dads who do it all, and the couples who take life by storm. Because we know that when your home life is supported, you are free to support the ones who matter most.
Your kids, your wife.
Whether you need a proactive manager for your home or a creative problem solver for your next big adventure, we are here to help you design a life of intention. LoyalHomeConcierge.com. Let's make life a little more beautiful together. Stay loyal to your community, and we'll see you next time.